Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to present to you Iceland's climate policy at this multilateral assessment. My name is Helga Barðadóttir and I'm the head of Iceland's delegation to UNFCCC. The MA process is valuable for us and I would like to thank the review team as well as the parties that submitted questions during the process. The answers can now be found in the MA portal. Iceland is positive to the process in general and this dialogue will be useful when working on future UNFCCC reporting. Iceland is a small and sparsely populated country situated in the North Atlantic Ocean. Our economy relies largely on natural resources, fisheries and renewable energy, with the main exports being seafood and industrial products from power-intensive industry, primarily aluminum. The third main pillar is the tourism industry, which has been the fastest growing sector for years. Iceland is committed to become one of the world's first carbon-neutral societies by transitioning to a fossil fuel-free future, setting a global example for sustainable development. Iceland borders with the Arctic Circle, but thanks to the Gulf Stream, the climate is relatively mild. The weathers can nevertheless be harsh and the climate is changing. Climate change represents growing uncertainty regarding our regional climate, which Iceland monitors closely. We have been experiencing increased rain when snow would have been expected, along with changes to permafrost and a recent increase in landslides. Our glaciers are melting faster and faster, so we can without a doubt say that Iceland is experiencing the effects of climate change. Iceland has been enhancing its work on climate change, adaptation with legal mandate for a national adaptation plan since 2019. We have in recent years worked on adaptation policy and a clear framing for climate services. Based on preparatory work and broad stakeholder engagement, our newly appointed Interministerial Climate Change Committee hopes to approve the first version of Iceland's national adaptation plan by spring 2025. Under the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, Iceland had a quantified economy-wide emission reduction target of 20% below 1990 levels by 2020. This target was fulfilled jointly with the EU member states according to a bilateral agreement between Iceland and the EU, where Iceland participated in the overall target of EU member states to reduce emissions of 20% by 2020. Iceland's target was therefore comparable to the targets of the EU member states and subject to comparable rules. Iceland's emissions exceeded the allocated AAUs for the period of 3,400 kiloton CO2 equivalent, but the appropriated amount needed to cover the deficit for CP2 was acquired from one of the EU's member states. Sufficient amount of AAUs were retired by the deadline of the true-up period. More detailed information can be found in Iceland's true-up period report. Iceland's emission profile is in many ways unusual, even unique. Here you see emissions from 1990 to 2023, not including LULUCF. The largest emission sources are industrial processes and energy. Total GHG emissions, excluding LULUCF, have increased by approximately a third since 1990, mostly due to the expansion of the metal production industry and an increase in transport due to the tourism sector. Here you can see the breakdown of total emission in Iceland. The biggest sources of emissions are from industry, 43%, of which 40% is from industrial processes, mainly from aluminum and ferrosilicon production that are covered by the EU ETS system. Although all stationary energy comes from renewables, emissions from within the energy category are still a big part of our emission profile. In total, 39%, dominated by fuel combustion in road transport, 20%, and fishing, 11%. At the same time, emissions due to electricity production and district heating are relatively small and almost exclusively linked to a small amount of CO2 emissions from geothermal power plants. Annual emissions from commercial fishing have seen an overall CO2 reduction by approximately a quarter since 1990. Emissions from both domestic flights and navigation have also declined since 1990. As stated earlier, Iceland's emission profile is quite unique. This is not only because of the energy profile, but also because of the emissions from the LULUCF sector is proportionally high compared to other countries. The two graphs show Iceland's emissions profile with and without LULUCF, and please note that they have different scales. The estimates of LULUCF emissions are subject to great uncertainty, both the emissions and sequestration. Iceland has therefore put much effort into research and monitoring of the sector in collaboration with experts in the field. Iceland has great mitigation potential for carbon sequestration by afforestation, revegetation, and from drained wetlands. In 2019, the European Union, Iceland and Norway formally agreed to work together on the climate target under the Paris Agreement. The target was at the time a 40% economy-wide reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Since then, the overall target has been raised to 55% reduction. The agreement entails that Iceland will continue participating in the EU ETS, and a target for emissions outside the EU ETS is set by the same methodology as applies to EU member states. The target for Iceland within the delivery of the 55% reduction target has not yet formally been defined, but is expected to be around 41%. Iceland states in its updated NDC submitted in February 2021 the intention to deliver the target in cooperation with the EU. An updated climate action plan was published this summer. The plan addresses all major sources and sinks and outlines 150 new and updated climate mitigation measures. Its focus is set on rapid clean energy transition in land transport with tax incentives for vehicles and grants for charging stations. Increased efforts are also put forward in the LULUCF sector. Stakeholders were engaged during the development of the action plan, and the final result reflects comments and suggestions received during the process. Emphasis is placed on immediate implementation of priority measures, and the plan's progress will be monitored regularly with an annual status report. New regulation on the Climate Council was set in place and sets criteria to assess and balance the collective expertise of its members. Another new regulation on the Interministerial Climate Change Committee gives the committee an additional mandate to oversee the National Adaptation Plan in addition to the Climate Action Plan. The committee now also has representatives from all ministries and the Icelandic Association of Local Authorities. Experts from the Environment Agency and the Met Office work with the committee. New structure has been set of the agencies under the ministry with the aim to build up fewer and bigger entities, streamline the work and make it more efficient. Innovation and implementation of new technology is vital when it comes to combating the climate crisis. In that regard, the Ministry has increased cooperation and support for startups companies in the field of climate, energy transition and circular economy in cooperation with the industry, public energy companies and municipalities. CCS is a technology that is high on the international agenda. In Iceland, the CarbFix solution has been developed where CO2 is dissolved in water and injected into the subsurface, where it reacts with favorable rock formation to form over a period of 2 years as solid carbonate minerals via natural processes. A direct air capture plant is also operated in Iceland and cooperates with the storage company. And to summarize, the Climate Action Plan and the different measures set forth in the plan are the main instruments in reaching the 2030 target. Iceland also aims to be among the first carbon neutral countries, and in order to reach these ambitious targets, we need broad cooperation from the whole society. On behalf of Iceland, thank you for your attention.